So I don't know if you guys ever watched The Sixth Sense, but the way that it goes is like Bruce Willis, he's going through the movie and he's helping this kid who sees ghosts. His wife is like ignoring him, and for some reason he's losing track of time, and everything around him feels a little bit obscure and unsettling. And then it's like towards the very end, it turns out the whole time he was a ghost and he didn't even know it. So imagine me going throughout life feeling very out of place and misunderstood for the last 26 years, only to find out that the whole time I am not a typical person. I have autism. My name is Julia, and I'm here to talk about what it's like to have high-functioning autism. I just want to also clarify that, like anyone who is neurotypical, people on the autism spectrum are super unique from each other. Just because I am describing my experiences doesn't mean everyone who has high-functioning autism can relate to me. So if you haven't watched my first video, autism is a neurodevelopmental condition that one is born with. It affects people's social reciprocity, social communication, flexibility, and sometimes even sensory processing. A lot of people with high-functioning autism, especially women, go undiagnosed because it is very subtle, but it isn't a character flaw. It is something you are born with, and you should definitely get assessed if you think you might have autism. So I know that there are a lot of YouTube videos out there that try to compare high-functioning autism with Asperger's, and the reality is, and I have verified it with like 3 different psychologists, there is no difference because Asperger's syndrome is no longer a definition that is acknowledged by the DSM-5. Anyone who was considered to have Asperger's is now considered someone with autism, being on the more functioning level of autism. Another term for high-functioning autism would be Autism Spectrum Disorder Level 1. That could also be short for ASD Level 1. I guess the biggest difference between someone who is ASD Level 1 versus someone who is ASD Level 2 or 3 is that ASD Level 1 usually needs only minimal support. But just because we only need minimal support doesn't mean we struggle as much as someone who is level 2 or level 3. And not to say that level 2 or level 3 struggle as much as someone who is on level 1. I don't think a lot of people are exposed to the various types of people who do have high-functioning autism. Usually when we do watch things in movies or in books, we usually we're only able to really pick up on someone's autism if they are level 2 or level 3. People who are considered level 1 are usually portrayed as like savants, and not all of us are savants. I wish I was a savant. I think only 10% of people within the spectrum are savants. Just speaking from my perspective of having autism, things that I feel that my autism has contributed to me is a sense of good memory. I really like people. Whenever I get to know someone new and they open up about their life story, I can recall what they're telling me word for word. And if we were to bring up a certain conversation again 2 years from now, I would be able to reflect on the facts and trivia that they have given me like very quickly. And I think most people would be really shocked as to how much I can memorize about things that even they forgot they told me. I also have really good facial recognition. I can recall someone that maybe I've talked to only once for an hour and maybe bump into him like across the country and recognize his face from like yards away. I'm really good at, like I said, memorizing like paying attention to details, looking at things in a more specific way, and breaking things down in an orientation or a process. But if someone were to tell me to do something that's abstract, I would feel really confused and I would feel very stuck because, you know, I have a very linear way of thinking. And that might be why I have been better at jobs that have job training support and orientation than other places that are like, you know, startups where you had to just figure things out on your own and learn on the spot. I have a hard time detecting micro expressions, which are certain emotional cues that people are not able to fake or hide. Some people are able to pick up on that intuition. I have not developed that intuition yet. So because I'm not able to pick up on people's emotions, I'm very literal, which is why I can remember people's conversations super well. So like when someone tells me something, I kind of take their word for it. It's hard for me to like see someone like facing me, knowing whether or not they are lying or bullshitting me. The only way I could really know when someone lying is when they repeat something but they have paraphrased what they've said before, or they've just said something that's really inconsistent. For me, and I think for a lot of people, people with autism have mind blindness, which is not being able to understand how others perceive things or how other people will react to certain situations. So example of mind blindness, I remember looking at someone's Instagram story about them having a certain like wound from an accident, and I think my first thought was, oh my god, this person needs help. So I screenshotted them like a certain ointment that they can use, and as well as like a link and what pharmacy to go to. I think the response I got was a little bit confused, and talking to my therapist about it, that wasn't the kind of attention that they wanted. So like I'm a bit embarrassed, but at least, you know, they have the option to use that ointment, which is, you know, totally fine. To know that you know that I have mind blindness, it's not that I am a psychopath or a narcissist. In fact, I genuinely care about people. I am capable of empathy. It's just hard for me to empathize if someone isn't verbally telling me what is going on internally with them. So like if someone is happy, I'm very happy for them. If they are stressed out, or if they're sad, I want to be there to like alleviate that pain, but I'm not able to unless you tell me what is going on. And it's very hard for me to interact with someone if they are passive aggressive. If anyone has met me before and is watching this, that's probably why I've always been super upfront with my questions, like, are you okay? Like, is this too much? Do you want to talk about something else? What do you want to talk about? I'm very literal, so it's sometimes hard for me to like really understand whether or not someone is joking or teasing. Sarcasm is something that I have a hard time detecting, and I also try to avoid being sarcastic because I don't really understand like the threshold of my sarcasm. Sometimes when I have been sarcastic in the past, it comes off as mean-spirited, so I just try to like avoid it altogether. Also, with being literal, it's hard for me to understand very subjective phrases. So for instance, growing up, my dad would say stuff like, you know, you're spacing out, stop it. And I would just tell him like, okay, what does that even mean? I don't even get what spaced out means. So he had to learn to just like avoid adjectives when he was talking to me, and he would just tell me like, okay, Julia, so if you are to walk around somewhere, you need to imagine where you're walking in your head, you need to swing your hips more, and you need to swing your arms as well. And so you need to look like as though you are swaying or dancing as you're walking. So that's how I learned not to be spaced out. Another phrase that people like to throw around is that I am socially awkward. I don't exactly see it as an insult. In fact, I think when people say that, they say that like they find it super endearing. But I just never really understood what people meant by that. So I finally had someone break it down as though it was like Urban Dictionary, and they described it as like me pausing when I'm talking, when people don't expect a pause. I start talking when people expect pauses, and I have a very distinct, descriptive way of speaking that not a lot of people are used to. As for my idiosyncrasies, because of my autism, those things, with the right intervention, I don't feel like I am inhibited in any way. If you recall, I talked about not being able to pick up on microexpressions, or if someone is smiling, how do I know if that's like a real smile or like a fake bitch smile? So there are many like tools in psychology about learning how to read people's facial expressions, but when I do get to a point where I can read someone's like intentions and look at their like nonverbal communication, it's going to be in a form of memory rather than instinct. I think there are times where instinct takes time, and it also takes experiences too. Like for now, even though I still struggle when people lie, I now know when someone was lying just looking back at past experiences and seeing that there were consistencies in what they were saying versus the outcome of their behaviors. So there you have it. Now you know, from my perspective, what it's like to have high functioning autism. It just means that I am a human being whose brain is wired differently, and that is perfectly okay.